What was the wildest way you found out you were being cheated on? She didn't realize that her iPhone messages were also synchronized to her Mac, which I was using to stream movies on. I saw texts popping up with her writing to her ex about how she loved taking his load on her face. I just packed up my shit and left. My entire friend group knew about it, and I only found out after the one real homie blackmailed her into admitting it. And when she did, it was the most insincere shit ever. It's no big deal. Everyone else thinks it's okay, and stuff like that. Suffice to say, I got my ass out of that relationship and friendship group real quick. Her other boyfriend who I didn't know existed, and I had a mutual friend who put two and two together and told me. I said I wanted to meet him, so he called him over. We talked out some things and then called her together at my suggestion. Good times were had by all minus one. He was drunk at his 21st, and while joking around with his friends, he started listing off all the women he'd slept with in the last year. I was standing right there, and we'd been dating for 2 years at that point. One of her friends was a photographer and wanted to do tasteful nudes, which apparently includes penetration, and multiple days of getting the right shot. We had a shared Google Drive, which her friend didn't know we shared. She demanded to read all the messages on my phone. I said no problem, but only if I could read the messages on hers. She had forgotten to delete a message from a guy saying all we ever do is fuck. Can't we hang out sometime? There was nothing on my phone. My 9-year-old son told me that there were strange men in the house when I was away working. She'd been at it for years. It's horrible to deal with at the time, but honestly, it's such a relief to be rid of such a toxic mess. Date night canceled day of. I decided to make it a guy's night to see the new Marvel movie at the time. As we entered, I saw her sitting at the theater snuggling up with a guy. Our seats were a few rows back. Saw them kiss a couple times. When we all left at the end of the movie, they were exiting their aisle as we walked down the stairs. She absolutely froze when she saw me. Blocked her on everything while I was in the parking lot. I was visiting a dying relative in the hospital, so I could not attend some stupid college party he and his roommate organized. I told him I couldn't go and asked him if he could come over later after visiting hours in the hospital because I knew my relative would die soon. I really just needed someone to be there with me. He said he probably wouldn't be able to, as he needed to help his roommate with party preparations, but would come over later if they finish early. The next day I saw pictures of him with his ex in his lap kissing, uploaded the previous night by his roommate. The roommate even knew we were dating. He was just too drunk to realize. He added me as a friend a week earlier on Facebook and I would see the pictures. I found out because my now ex-wife's affair partner's wife called me. My ex had been sleeping with a married man even though she always said she was a lesbian. He had a breakdown when my wife cheated on him with his also male best friend. So he told his wife, who messaged me on Facebook, then called me, sent the screenshots and told me everything. Ex ruined 3 marriages all at once. Takes a long time, but eventually you realize you deserve better. Not me, but my dad. His girlfriend at the time had been cheating on him with his friend, who didn't know they were in a relationship. My dad found out when his friend told him he was gonna propose to her. Not really wild, but my ex-wife and I owned a small business together. One day I noticed a strange email address on the office computer. Her first name and a different last name. I realized that email was still logged in, so I took a peek. I found 2 years worth of emails between my ex and some dude she dated before me. So I printed out every email and had it bound in a binder ready to present to my divorce lawyer. Wife soon-to-be ex was in rehab and started fucking someone. She got out and told me she was going to a meeting. Suddenly, I remembered I could track her car cause I pay for the Lexus Inform app. She was at a hotel. I guess I need to write a book. After his company Christmas party, I stayed over at his place, got up the next morning and came downstairs to find his girlfriend cooking breakfast for him. Needless to say, she and I were both pretty shocked. She broke up with me, and as I was going through deleting her socials, I noticed a post she made on her Snap story that was her and a guy with a post saying "with my king." Post was made 2 hours ago, and we had only broke up an hour ago. Came home off a deployment. My now ex-wife was acting really weird, but I figured it was because I had been gone for a year, and everything was just taking me time to get reacquainted. About 3 days after I returned, I had a notice from my unit stating my vehicle had 3 tickets at another base. We were in Germany, a few hours away. In the past few months, when I went in to find out what the deal was, all three had photos attached to them of speeding through a checkpoint. All three had my wife and some other guy. She was kissing him in the third pic. He was driving my car. His sister kept calling me Annie and my name is Andy. It's short for Andrea. I corrected her a few times, but I didn't care for her at all, so I ignored her since I thought she was trying to be obnoxious. We only saw her once a week or so. Then I find out after almost a year that he was cheating. Only I was the mistress because he had been with Annie for 3 years, and they had a child together. I still don't know if his sister was calling me Annie to laugh behind my back, or to make him uncomfortable. Probably both. It must have been hilarious to her. Anyway, he used to drive my car all the time, and one day, I was out running errands and came out of the store to find a woman with her toddler standing by the car. I asked her if I could help her, and she said, "No, I'm just trying to find out what store my boyfriend is in. This is his car." So yeah, we both learned a lot that day. We hung out all day together, comparing stories of times he was unreachable. Then we confronted him together. He walked into her apartment and sat down on the couch with a beer, before noticing I was standing there with her in the kitchen. He said nothing, just put the beer down, got up and left, ignoring both of us as we peppered him with questions. This was about 13 years ago, and I haven't spoken to him since. She stayed with him. She was 6 months pregnant the day I met her and found out about her. I was out with this girl I'd been with a few months, went to a nice restaurant for dinner and stopped at a local dive later to hang with mutual friends and coworkers. I went into the men's room later to see her legs under a stall, and heard a coworker's voice saying, "Suck that dick." Left the bathroom, went directly to the bartender, and had her split our check and paid mine and bounced like fucking Tigger. Game over. My dumb ass loved her. I went on a 2-week holiday, and when I returned, he was acting really strange. I tried to ask him what was wrong, and why was he acting off. He started an argument with me, told me I was too young and insecure, asked me to leave, and didn't want to see me again. I left sobbing, totally confused. 9 months later, I see him walking through the city with his ex and a newborn baby. Now I understand. He told on himself. He randomly called me asking why I messaged his ex, and I was super confused because I never did, and I told him it's a misunderstanding. I can reach out to her to explain it's not me. He got super defensive and threatened that if I reached out to her, we're done. I found it odd and reached out to clear my name, and she spilled saying he's been cheating on me as well as playing her and multiple other girls all at the same time. Turns out one of the girls made a fake account of me and reached out to her. Never found out who it was, but this is the one time I'm glad having a stalker worked in my favor. Otherwise, I would have never known. My colleague had an elaborate wedding cathedral ceremony, hundreds of guests to a guy she'd been with for years. She found out shortly afterwards he'd been cheating because they met this girl who was his colleagues and gym buddy when they were walking in the park, and their 2 French bulldogs who were noisy and protective didn't bark at her at all. There was no reason for her to have met the dogs before, as she had never been to their house to her knowledge. So she snooped on his phone while he was asleep, and apparently he had been cheating for over a year and she was pregnant, and they were opening a business together. He was leaving as soon as he had the whole thing set up. When the dust settled, the only thing she was pissed off about was the expense they and her parents had spent on the wedding. He could have called the whole thing off and saved thousands. She didn't learn though. Her second wedding was nearly as elaborate. We broke up, and then her best friend and best friend's husband told me that night. She had been fucking a few different people but settled on one. They got married, had kids, then she cheated on him with me one night years later. I didn't know they were together. They divorced, she remarried, got divorced, and now she is on husband number 3. My favorite part is, she portrays herself as an amazing Christian woman that is better than everyone because she is so Christian. I was out at a bar with some friends when I started talking to the people next to me. They were wearing our town's local social sports club shirt, so I asked them if they knew my wife, who was in the club. They responded with, "Yeah, I know her. I hear she is cheating on her douchebag husband." I then reply, "I am her husband," and ran out the bar crying. Had a dog who would chew up my wife's panties whenever we had sex. After 7 years of marriage and 2 kids, the sex was very infrequent, and then one day I found a pair of chewed panties. And then a few days later, another pair. I was like, well, somebody is having sex, and it ain't me. She texted me saying I did something wrong as an excuse to break up. I went into class and my best mate told me she cheated. And then when I rung her back and told her I knew, she sobbed and cried and rung me every night for a month and my dumb ass took her back. 3 years later she cheated on me again. Taught me a good lesson as a teenager, that's for sure. My fire alarm woke me up when it was low on batteries at 5 a.m. and I thought it was strange that my girlfriend wasn't home yet she was out drinking with her friend. I tried to call her, but she didn't answer. That's when I remembered that we had the friend's spare key. She lived like the next house over, so I went to check, and my girlfriend was sleeping in her friend's bed with some guy. If the fire alarm didn't wake me, I think I wouldn't have ever known. Got out of work very early. I was supposed to work a 16-hour and got out after 6 because I spiked a fever and started puking. Went home to find them in bed together. I have never been so calm in my life. It terrified them. Had one of those catching up phone calls with a girl I used to be good friends with. Told her all about my girlfriend during the conversation. The next day, I'm supposed to see my girlfriend and she cancels on me. No big deal. A couple hours later, my old friend starts texting me asking me questions about my girlfriend. She ends up telling me she's pretty sure my girlfriend is in the back seat of a car with her and that my girl's been all over her boyfriend's brother and they're all on their way to the movies now. I try calling her and texting to confront her. She calls me back and breaks up with me. The cherry on top is my girlfriend and I work together, and the guy she's cheating with is my manager. She ends up quitting not long after, but I have to work with this guy for another year before I change jobs lol. She called me hysterical, crying a morning after we had a small fight, saying how much she fucked up. I calmed her down enough to get her to start talking, and she told she cheated on me with her stepbrother who was the room over. Never before and never since did I have such an emotional shift from extremely worried and happy to hear her, to absolute disgust and betrayal. She basically moved him into our house. She told me it was to monitor him, because he was depressed and needed help. Apparently tried to off himself by swallowing a bedsheet. I then realized that the whole depressed and needs help line was what she would use over any guy she was being suspicious with. Like the one guy that she had history with, who made a move on her while we were together, and kept coming back into her life when he was depressed. Or the guy mentioned in the shredded note I found in her nightstand talking about how she wanted to run away with him and get a surprise divorce. Or the guy that she had this weird fixation with role-playing Khaleesi and Khal Drogo within online chats. All depressed, all needed her help. Once it clicked, I was done. Thanks for listening to Digital Apathy.